Okay, so all right, so I'm going to talk again about similar things to what Danielle has done, but probably taking a different tack, and I call it to keeping track in my tree. And basically, I'm doing my own private research for my own family tree. I'm not so worried about generating reports. I'm not a professional doing reports for other people. So I'm mainly focusing on just keeping track of what I'm doing. And so it's really, but with the same token, I want to make sure that I'm doing everything genealogically correct and following the GPS, etc. So a little bit of a different approach. And so one of the things that I've been struggling with, as I said in the earlier presentation, was how to keep my research information from my genetic analysis into my family tree, and making sure that I'm able to, rather than going back and forth between the two systems, reinventing the wheel all the time, saying, where am I up to, and making things easier for myself. And I've been doing this for quite a long time. I work in Family Tree Maker. I do my research in Family Tree Maker. I sync to Ancestry, and I do my genetic stuff in GDAT, which is a genealogical database for DNA, a genealogical DNA tool. And so trying to bring those two together. And the other thing that I've been doing for a long time, I first started this in 2012, was doing a table of where I'm up to. How many ancestors have I identified? How many have I DNA confirmed to the individual or couple level, and who's tentative, etc. Similar to what Danielle was talking about following up. And yes, Roberta Estes first talked about this in 2012. And ever since she did that blog post, I've been sort of doing it annually. But it was always giving me a very big headache, because I had to revisit. I was counting things differently every time. And I didn't quite think, I'd come to do it and I'd think, why have I done that? That's not right. And redo all the numbers all the time. So I went through various iterations of trying to complete that as well. So some of the things I'm going to show you is how I've actually addressed all those. And I've got 3 blog posts in my Gene Monkey Explains blog to do with images, filters, and citations. So that's there if you need to look at it later. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was images, which is where I went first, and Danielle's already talked about that a bit. And I ended up creating a whole range of images. I started off with just a DNA tester and DNA confirmed, but I ended up with this great long list. I think there's about 10 there. But basically, again, just similar to what Danielle was saying, trying to look at my tree so I could just quickly look at my tree and know where I'm up to. So I have images related to those categories I was talking about before: tentative confirmations, direct line confirmations, indirect line confirmations, similar to a Danielle. I also have some for potential ancestors where I've done research and I've got hanging branches in my tree. I've got those people identified, well, the top level identified in my tree, because often I would be looking at my tree and I'm thinking, who the hell's this person? Why have I got him in my tree? And it used to take me quite a long time to work that out. So I've developed a way to actually keep track of that. And also, if I start to research someone and I don't actually put the DNA match in, I just start with their ancestor who I'm interested in, I've got a little tag there for ancestor of a DNA match as well, so that I know that there's more to that story, and put a little note on there saying who the DNA match is. And in this chart that's in my blog, I describe what the image is meant to reflect, and also a few things that I've set up in Family Tree Maker, filters and source citations, which is similar to, I think, Danielle's legacy hashtags and groups and things, to try and work with this information. And as I say, I add it to Family Tree Maker and sync it to Ancestry, and it would look something like this. And you can see there that the purple sort of cross DNA image is for my confirmed ancestors at the individual or couple level. And you can see there the orange ones are where it is DNA tentative. And I've also got one there, you can see on that place card profile up there, I've got a very big X match on the Arthur Courtney line, which I know comes from his mother somehow. And I can't, occasionally just link up other people and see what my results, how my results change. But I've got that potential X connection image there to remind me that I've got that big X match, and don't forget about it, because I need to keep going back and looking at those. By using images, I find that it easily identifies the lines that are DNA confirmed and those that need more work. So this is a bit of a chart from my second great grandparents down the bottom, James Pace and Harriet Parker. James married twice. He's also got that Sarah Ann Marsh, and we have quite a few matches down that line. But if you look at Isaac Pace, his parents, Isaac Pace and Sarah Monk, you can see that they're DNA confirmed. Going back the next generation, you can see, because I've got on the left-hand side, Jonathan Pace and Elizabeth Skeets, you can tell that I've got segment triangulation because these are past second great grandparents, and I've got the DNA confirmed symbol on them. On the right-hand side, on Sarah's side, I've only got matches going back with tree triangulation because I've got that orange symbol there. So I haven't got any segment data. So I think it's okay because we've got DNA matches, but I'm not 100% sure. And by having those symbols in the images in the tree, it enables you to quickly look at the descendants here, and you can see there that I've got DNA matches coming through 5 different lines there, but most of them are obviously at ancestry because they've got the orange symbol. Only one of them has got chromosome data, which you can see there on the left-hand side with the black DNA and the green DNA symbol. That's what I use for indirect lines, so it's not coming through my own line. My own line gets the purple or the orange, but indirect lines with chromosome data that are DNA confirmed get this symbol. So as a quick look, I can see, oh, okay, I have got some triangulated data there, but I've only got tentative matches elsewhere. So where do I go next? And that actually flows into your tree, as I was explaining this morning, that having one match or having 10 match, you can't tell that from that image. It's just really static. So quite a number of years ago, I started developing source citations for DNA matches, similar to what Danielle says, at the DNA match level, and putting those in my tree to give me a clue about what I had, and trying to make sure it was aligned with the GPS. We have all these different things, which I spoke about this morning, which need to be factored in terms of our confirmations. And back in 2021, Danielle did this course, Cite Your Sources workshop, which is probably still available in the shop. And at that time, I went back and I looked at all the source citations that I was using, and I revamped them all based on what Danielle was suggesting in that session. So I went back, and so I've been slowly changing a lot of my source citations. You can see there on the right-hand side there that before I used to just record DNA match and I've got a date, and it didn't really give me much information. You can see there for those 2 that I've got highlighted, we've got the name Bastelli and Stevens. So that's telling me the name of the match, but it's not telling me much more about the details of the match. So I wasn't very happy with that. And as I was working through these citations, I tried to develop a citation for each of the various scenarios of DNA matches and evidence that I had. And for those matches, Danielle was talking about matching, having a citation for the tree. I wasn't going down that path necessarily, and what I was doing was just adding a screenshot as a media item into those source citations for people's trees, because sometimes they delete them as well. So it's nice to have that record. And I privatize them in Family Tree Maker. You can privatize certain images, and pedigrees are one that I do actually privatize, so that I've got them in the citation if I want to have a look at them about where that information came from. So one thing I realized was that I wanted to have the shared ancestor information more upfront, because I couldn't really see it in the citation in Family Tree Maker, because it only shows me the first 2 lines when I'm looking at that information in my tree. So I amended the source citations to put the shared ancestor at the front of the citation. And you can see there on the left now, I've got the Murphy-Bateman in caps. It stands out a bit more and it's not hidden. I don't have to go clicking on each of the citations to find them. And then the other thing I did was similar to Danielle, I was adding matches and going up and down the line, putting this citation on every single match and the connection between that person and the most recent common ancestor and me and that most recent common ancestor. And I was ending up with hundreds of things on my profile. And I thought to myself, this has got to be able to be done in a different way. So I merged citations where we had multiple people coming into the same shared ancestor. And you can see on the bottom one there, I've got Murphy Bateman, two second cousin twice removed times 4, and a third cousin times 3. Now it should actually show who that match is, as some of them are still being worked upon. Should show that that's a match to my mother, and I've got a comment there. But if you go into the citation, there's probably a lot more information. But wanting to see that on the actual profile when I was looking at that ancestor James Murphy in Family Tree Maker. And these are a whole list of other citations that I developed at that time after Danielle's, or at the time of Danielle's workshop. And so you can see I've got quite a few here, and these are all in the blog post, so you can go there to look at these later. But you can see there that I've got some for DNA confirmed, third cousin or closer, DNA matches at different sites, so that I was able to differentiate in the source list those different citations and different sets of DNA evidence that I might have for a particular ancestor. And going further, Y-DNA, mtDNA, and DNA Painter, etc. So I'll just give you an example, and I talked before about walking back the chromosomes, and because I'm interested in getting back way back on my lines, I'm more interested in distant matches than I am with third cousins or closer, because haven't got very many of them. So I'm working backwards all the time, and you can see here on Elizabeth Richards' profile, I'm interested in how far back I'm walking each of the chromosomes, how many matches on particular chromosomes do I have to this ancestor? Is there only 1 or is there 10? You can see here the way I've revamped the citations to read, and they may not be to the letter of the law in citation making, they are useful for me for navigating in my tree, because I want to know things like, do I have individual matches, or are there lots of matches? Are they tentative or are they confirmed? Now you can see on the way that they're sorting in the source list there that the ancestry DNA ones are coming up top, which is very nice. And you can see there in that first one, I've got 6 third cousins confirmed on the ancestry DNA third cousin or closer citation. So that means that there's 6 people in there that go back to this Elizabeth Richards and her husband, John Coate. But if you go down the bottom there, I've also got a DNA match at 4th cousin once removed that comes back to this line. And this is one of the things I used to do, and this one obviously needs to be revamped, because I used to put on there whether they were at GED for an ancestry match, whether they were on GED match or not. So that would give me a clue to say, oh, I should go and have a look at that match and see if I can fit it into a triangulated group and move it into the chromosome data field, rather than citing it as an ancestry DNA match, because that's actually more useful for my analysis. This one up here says Coates Richards, so the shared ancestors are Coates Richards, so that means that those particular matches are going back to the ancestral couple, again to Elizabeth Richards and her husband John Coate. But down here, I've got a triangulated group on chromosome 10 going back to Richards, which are her parents. Unfortunately, she's got John Richards married Susanna Richards, but they are 2 different Richards lines, but they're all from the same area, so it can be a bit confusing. So, but that's good evidence that I can see at that list that I've already confirmed a match back to her parents. And going further, even another go, Richards Coggins is the maternal her maternal grandparents, and Richards Lloyds is the paternal grandparents. So I know that I've gone back to her parents, and I've also been able to confirm a little bit further back than that on both those lines as well, just by looking at that source list. And one of the other things I might want to look at is how many triangulated groups I've got and which chromosomes. So I've written the citations now for triangulated groups. So I look at the shared match, then I put the chromosome number, and I can see there that I've got multiple chromosomes. If you look down the list, 6, 11, 20, 14, 14, 11, and 10. So lots of different bits of evidence there on the chromosome level, and it's walking back the chromosomes from one generation to the next. So coming from me up to Elizabeth and through her parents and their parents. So syncing to Ancestry, it would show up like this. So here she is at Ancestry. For individually confirmed ancestors, I put that little emoji on there, and I'm using the uninterval numbers on there as well. But those sources we were just looking at in Family Tree Maker appear under other sources on Ancestry, and you can see them over there to the right. DNA confirmed is fairly, doesn't have very much information, and most people won't even click on those, but they are there as proof or evidence in your tree. If you click on them, you can see the citation information over here, and you can see that that's the full citation. So some of these citations I'm doing, I'm still trying to refine them into the standard format, because I did do a lot of citation work before I refined the list. So the steps in Family Tree Maker, I'll just quickly run through them, and it's similar to what Danielle was describing. You create the source, you create the repository, so put down that there's Ancestry DNA or whatever, and then you can edit the citation and add details. So I'm not using the details and the text in the correct letter of the law, but it helps me to navigate in the tree. And as Danielle was saying, there is a notes field in Family Tree Maker as well, where I put a bit more detail about the matches and their names and sometimes GEDmatch numbers, etc. In this particular example, I've only got some names and relationships and when they matched. And I marked them, there's a little lock there that you can click to make them private, so that when someone clicks on that citation in Ancestry, they can't see this information, but at least you've got it there. And then the citation is linked to a number of facts, and you can see there by clicking on that blue link who's actually in that citation. So sometimes you might look at that and say, are all these people, Brad, Gail, Mark and Ariel, are they all in there? And you'll be able to see who they're linked to. So in terms of the way I develop the source citations, I've put the type of citation at the front. I always start with DNA, and that's mainly so they appear in my source list in alphabetical order. Then I add in the citation detail area, I add the MRC name or couple, and followed by a segment if I've got one, so that when I come along and find someone else who matches on chromosome 6 or whatever for Coat Richards, I can just amend that citation. All I need to do is go in and change the note a little bit to include that person, and then add them to them and their line up to where they connect in on the tree. And you'll probably only have to do 2 or 3 links, because these other people are already there. And then when you want to view it on your profile, you can see the sources appear alphabetically, and DNA confirmed is up there at the top of the list. So it's always giving you those clues. And that builds a source citation that looks something like this. And that's just a couple of examples. So Danielle talked about Wikitree, and one thing I did want to mention was that there is an automated citation maker in Wikitree, and you can see there that will you feed in the various bits of information and it'll generate the citation for you, and that's a link for that citation maker under the tree. And when you add a DNA confirmation to Wikitree, there are some radio buttons that you select about being confirmed with DNA, and that gives you these nice little yellow DNA symbols with a little tick. which means those ancestors have been confirmed. But Wikitree wants you to put a citation whenever you add one of these little yellow ones. So this is a good way to do it if you're a bit unfamiliar with that. But we are having a workshop, as Danielle mentioned earlier, back in a couple of weeks' time, in March, 30th of March, and that can be one of the things, if people are interested, that we talk about that day. So so the next thing was filters, and similar to I think the hashtags and groups that Danielle was talking about, I found that filters were a good way to give me this information that I've been trying to keep up to date. I basically put this table together about once a year just to see how I'm going. And as you can see, they're also good for navigating around in your tree and doing that report. So you can see there I've got about 21,000 people in my tree at the moment. And the filter box down the bottom there, you can filter on different things. I've actually created a whole range of filters that are to do with DNA confirmation as well as research. And that's just a bit of a list of the different filters that I've established. And I'll show you a little bit about how I use those. And it has to be combined with custom facts. So I've added 3 custom facts to my tree that are in that red box there. The first one is the DNA status, and second one, DNA confirmed. And the third one is a one I call research tree, which is just giving me why they're in my tree. And sometimes I might just put, you know, my husband's line, or in that particular one, I've got a triangulated group number there. So really just trying to give me an alert to why I put that person in my tree. And the filters, the way I've set them up, have been able to give me those bits of information there, the total number of ancestors, what I've DNA confirmed to individuals or couples, and tentative. And basically, I won't go through all of this, but basically for creating the ancestors, I only need 2 filters. One is to know who all my ancestors are, because I want to know how many I've actually got in my tree. That's direct line ancestors. And then I want to know up to 7 generations, because my table is calculating to 254, which is 5th great grandparents. So I want to know how many I've got for the table for that. And these things down the bottom are just how you do it in Family Tree Maker. I won't go through that at the moment. And so the second step is to use the customized facts. And on the left-hand side here, these are some of the examples of what I might put in the DNA status. So testers, I put where they've tested. If they're a shared ancestor, or the shared ancestral couple, or TG ancestor is where they are a ancestor from a hanging branch or cluster that I've got loosely connected in my tree. I know they're related to me somehow, but I don't know how. And then they show up on a profile over here if you set them up as a custom fact in Family Tree Maker. So that every time I look at Harriet Parker, I can see those things there, and I know where I'm up to with her. And then it's a matter of running some of these tools to get the information through running smart filters. So in this particular case, for my table, for the confirmation table, I run 4 reports: the ancestors at 7 generation, confirmed ancestor, confirmed couple, and tentative ancestor. And you can see here, this is where I put in the confirmed ancestor. And then it'll give me a list and a number. So in this particular case, for DNA confirmed ancestor, I've got 50 when I ran this. And then I can plug it into the table. Oh, why isn't it going? Some of those ones I mentioned for research, similar to, I think Danielle mentioned unconfirmed ancestors. I've got one for unconfirmed ancestors. I've also got ones for particular lines that I'm looking at, using colour coding for mum's paternal lines, which people who know about me and my research, they're my biggest issues. And by using these filters, you can get information and lists and work on those people. So if, for example, I was working on the McInerney's and I identified them, and then I can just get up a single list of all the McInerney's and start working on them. And then this color coding that I use down here for some of these filters is different to the general coding, and for Family Tree Maker, which is a great thing, I think, is able to color code all your ancestors. So I have general color coding set up for my 8 great grandparent lines, and I've highlighted all descendants, all ancestors and all descendants for particular colors for the 8 second great grand, are they second great? Yeah, no, 8 great grandparent lines. And that way they show up with a dot when they're in the index, and that can be very useful, particularly when you're looking at John Smith and all these John Smiths. Well, which ones are mine and which ones are some of these hanging ancestor trees? Mine will have a appropriate coloured dot. One of the other useful things is looking at your unconfirmed ancestors by date of birth. So working back from the bottom, my most recent unconfirmed ancestor is Arthur George Courtney, which is why I spend so much time on him. Potential ancestors, which are some of these groups I've identified. I've got 144 in that category. So they all factor in somehow, mostly on mum's paternal lines, but we can't quite work out how a lot of them do. But it's useful to be able to bring them up in a list and then just start working on all the blue ones perhaps, or all the orange ones on a particular day when you're researching. And smart filters are pretty easy to create, and this is particularly one I've done for DNA testers. So you can see here that I've got 1,003 DNA testers in my tree. Shows 1,019 over there, and this here, and this did my head in for a while, but it includes the also known ancestors. So there's a button you can turn them off on in Family Tree Maker, so if the number, to get the numbers consistent. But this number will include certain people if they've got an AKA twice. So that shows how many are in my tree. If you run the filter to show who hasn't been identified, you can see there that I've got 625 of those. I haven't worked out how they fit, but I do have, 378 who have been identified. And I know I've probably got a lot of people who I haven't put in my tree who I do know how they fit. So I'm constantly putting those people in because it helps through lines work too. It has been great for getting a lot more common ancestors being identified for me over at Ancestry. And coloured dots will appear for your DNA testers. So I give them if I know where they fit in, I tag them as a particular colour for the line that I'm interested, or that they connect into. And they'll get that automatically if you've actually connected them up to the most recent common ancestor. But and TG ancestors, I do also colour code them, and but they appear in the full index view if they're in a triangulated group or cluster that I know where they came from. So that can also help you, that you can see possible connections in your index by using the colour coding. So that's all I wanted to talk about. As I said earlier, all of this is in my blog under 3 separate posts. The second one here, the filters, also includes a link to the February 22 talk I did for the Family Tree Maker group. So that has a lot more information in it than the others. DNA source citations, pretty dated. It's 2021 and it's on DNA Sydney, but I'm going to convert it to a blog post soon. So hopefully that gave you some additional ideas about how you might utilize some of these things in your tree to keep track of your research in your tree.